So, welcome everybody to the first of our new series of talks. Um, the Commonwealth Heritage Forum is a charity, and through the Vinehill Trust, we fund a number of heritage skills projects around the Commonwealth. And we've done a number of talks on different subjects over the years, all of which are available for free on our website. But we decided this time that it would be great to have a look at some of the projects that we have been funding and give those involved with those projects the chance to talk in a bit more depth about what they have been doing and the people that they have been providing heritage skills training to. So I am absolutely delighted that to kick off this series, we have Jabir Mohamed talking to us about the Heritage Skills Training Programme in Berbera in Somalia. Jabir is a Somali researcher, architectural designer, and heritage preservationist committed to protecting at-risk built heritage across the Somali Peninsula. He is the founder and director of RAAD RAAC, which means to research or follow a trace in Somali. Jabir leads a diverse range of projects that bridge architectural research, community-driven restoration, and sustainable design practices. His work is dedicated to preserving the rich yet largely unknown history of the Somali Peninsula, with a particular focus on Islamic architecture and cultural sites that have suffered from war, neglect, and climate change. I don't want to say too much more, but let Jabir get into his talk. Thank you very much, Jabir, for joining us this evening, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Roanna. Um, yeah, so my name is Jabir. I think it was a great introduction. So yeah, I'll get into it. So Somalia is often described as the land of poets, a society where oral tradition has safeguarded identity through centuries of migration, trade, colonialism, conflict. But the same cannot be said of its material culture. In the past, Somalia's built heritage reflected diverse regional identities and environmental adaptations. Coastal cities like Mogadishu, Berbera, or Barawa developed coral stone and lime architecture suited to maritime climates, while the interior was shaped by nomadic and semi-settled structures responsive to arid conditions. Scholarship on African vernacular architecture, from Labelle Prussian's work on nomadic architecture to Trevor Marchand's studies of craft knowledge and Hassan Fathi's advocacy for climate-responsive design, provides an important foundation for understanding indigenous construction systems. Yet, these discussions often separate material heritage from intangible heritage, or focus on traditions that remain relatively stable or undocumented, everything that Somali heritage is not. Through my work in Berbera, the development of the heritage training programs, oral history projects, and the creation of Somalia's first museum initiative in more than 3 decades, I've encountered a different reality. Kwame Anthony Appiah writes in The Ethics of Identity that our identities make ethical claims upon us. As a Somali and a member of the diaspora, I found that I found myself navigating these claims through heritage work. Somalia, or Somaliland, which we're going to be focusing on, is often celebrated for its oral traditions, yet I have become increasingly concerned by the fragility of relying on memory alone. While stories survive, the physical environments that produce them are rapidly disappearing. My work has therefore focused not simply on documenting traditional building practices, but also understanding why they have become devalued or dismissed as old-fashioned, despite its environmental intelligence and cultural significance, and why they have been abandoned in favor of imported models of concrete and steel modernity. What has become increasingly clear is that cen- the central fact change, the central challenging challenge facing Somali heritage is not simply physical deterioration. The greater challenge is cultural. It concerns how societies assign value, whose knowledge is recognized, and what forms of progress are considered desirable. In this sense, the most urgent conservation task may not be repairing buildings, but re-evaluating the assumptions that have led to their abandonment. At the age of 9, after sketching buildings in my notebooks, my brother told me that it's actually a real job and it's called architecture. Since then, I knew I wanted to study architecture to help rebuild my country. In the beginning, that meant futuristic skyscrapers. But when I got to university and started to notice that we are losing our local skills and materials, I started to really research it and get into it. After years of documenting the relentless demolitions, collapses, and sham restoration of Somali heritage, I graduated. The post-war building boom raged on. Land became more valuable than the history that sat on it. My own route into heritage wasn't straightforward. I worked in archives as an architectural designer, delivered an oral history project at the Museum of London, helped develop the Somali Museum and Archive with Numbi Arts at the Whitechapel Gallery, and worked with UNDP digitally rebuilding lost monuments through memory. In 2023, I got the opportunity to train in heritage skills with the Commonwealth Heritage Forum in Barbados, learning how to diagnose decay and aid in conservation plan for a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I then trained in practical conservation from Mark Wormersley up in Yorkshire with the CHF support also. I ended up with more mortar on the ground than on the wall, but I'm proud to say I can do a bit better now. On the 6th of May 2023, the Mogadishu lighthouse collapsed, killing 4 children. Despite repeated advocacy and emails for Somali heritage at conferences or organizations I approached, they simply didn't know there was any heritage in Somalia worth protecting or required decades of experience and PhDs. Either way, I wasn't experienced enough. Thankfully, I was determined, optimistic, and a bit naive. And Philip and Sarah both saw the urgency and the opportunity to make a real impact. Somalia has a rich but underdocumented architectural heritage. The ruins of one of the region's earliest, or even the world's earliest, one of the world's earliest mosques remains in Zayla. Its Qibla, which is the direction where we pray as Muslims, is still orientated to Jerusalem before it was changed. Medieval writers such as Ibn Battuta, Yaqut al-Hamawi, and Ibn Sa'id describe Berbera, Mogadishu, or Zayla as major centers of trade and learning. The Masjid Fakr ad-Din, which was built in 1269 CE, stands today as one of the finest surviving monuments on the East African coast. Yet decades of conflict, neglect, theft of inscriptions and pieces of marble, and destructive restorations have eroded much of this historic fabric. The absence of effective heritage protection laws have enabled speculative development practices that place historic buildings at risk. In some cases, developers enter agreements with property owners without purchasing the land outright, and historic structures are demolished and replaced with apartment blocks, which the developer rents until the construction costs are recouped and an agreed profit is recovered. Ownership for the building is then transferred back to the landowner. Berbera, the city that I'm working in, is a historic port city on the Gulf of Aden. It was first mentioned in the Prepolis of the Erythraean Sea in the 1st century AD. Berbera was part of a chain of Somali city-states dotting the Somali coast that grew rich from trading frankincense, myrrh, gold, musk, and ivory, and benefiting from being outside the Roman sphere of influence. Somali and Arab traders hid the Indian origins of cinnamon and made them believe it was produced on the Somali coast. The Romans then named it Regio Cinnamafore, which it means land of the cinnamon. Berbera was a major port of the Ifat, Adal, and Isaaq sultanates. It was sacked by the Portuguese in 1518, occupied by Mocha in the 17th century, by the Ottomans in the 1800s, the Egyptians in 1875, and then the British in 1884, when it served as the capital of the British Somaliland Protectorate. After gaining independence in 1960 and the formation of the Somali state, Berbera became the second most important port city following Mogadishu. The city is layered with shared heritage from each period. It contains Somali mosques, homes and markets, colonial British administrative buildings, and Ottoman mosques and townhouses, all built in local coral stone. Today, Berbera is located in the Republic of Somaliland, a self-declared independent state which seceded from Somalia in 1991, where much of the old port was destroyed in the war following the Somaliland's declaration of independence. Unlike Hargeisa, which is now the capital of Somaliland, where aerial bombardment and shelling destroyed up to 90% of the city, much of the heritage in Berbera survived that fate, but unfortunately now is crumbling from neglect, abandonment, or restorations using the wrong materials, exacerbating decay. However, Berbera is once again becoming an important center for commerce and trade. With the increase in international investment in the port and in the city, the built heritage faces a new threat from unthinking redevelopment and the lack of any laws protecting this heritage. Today, nearly one-third of the buildings lie in ruin, many abandoned homes and even more at risk of demolition. So we found a site to give an example of what restoration can contribute. Through the CHF's Queen Elizabeth II Heritage Training Program, we had the opportunity to train 29 locals in the first phase on this site containing Ottoman, British and Somali structures, which is going to be the Berbera Museum. Together with Dr. Mark Womersley, a lime expert from the UK, we worked on the only building on the site that was left more or less as it was originally. We began by testing what was already there, the mortar, what timbers were salvageable, and what had to go. Seeing as there wasn't any clear knowledge of where the materials came from, what mixtures were used, or what techniques were employed, we portioned the outhouse into 3 different sections. The first section on the left was trying to rediscover how it was done from what we found in situ. The second in the middle was taken over by a local elder who tried to recreate what he remembered seeing when he was younger. And the last section on the right was a combination of all of the successful parts of both of those. And that's the mixture and the technique that we took to the restoration of the rest of the site. So this is the small outbuilding. We completely changed the roof. Some of the timbers, none of the timbers had to be removed, but there were planks of wood and then lime on top of it, and those planks were completely rotten, and it looks a lot much better now. And this is the exterior. So in phase 2, we scaled up that operation from what we learned from that building and decided we were restoring the rest of the site. So this is one of the processes that came out of that testing in the beginning. This is a traditional way of making mounds, of mixing it with lime and sand and leaving it to, as they say in Somali, to ferment for maybe 2 weeks or more. We then use that lime to replaster the interior of this Ottoman hall, which then became a British it was a club for officers afterwards. Um, and we this is the before. There was a lot of debonding plaster. There was a lot of concrete that was used in it, which caused more dampness and salts to, and it just made exacerbated the issues. So we removed a lot of the bad materials and replastered and repainted, as well as um, fixing the roof, which is in this next section. Uh, the roof was maybe 100 times bigger than the one we worked on in the small one. So it was a much bigger task. I think we had about nearly 40 uh, builders on site, as opposed to 10 in the last phase. And it was quite high up, so it was quite unsafe. But uh, we managed to, even though health and safety isn't a big thing there, we managed to convince people to wear, if you can see on the right, these harnesses and hook them up. But we first began by demolishing the roof, and we had to get a delivery of wood, which was stuck on a ship conveniently, which put a 2 month delay on the project. Um, and then also repointing these loose stones on the parapets and getting all of the roof, the hardwoods ready, and the decoration on the outside, which holds back the lime. Um, a fascia, I guess in English, but in Somali it's called bambatagi. The last roof, as you can see on the top right, on the top left, was completely destroyed. It was letting in all of the water that whenever we had a bit of rain, it was letting in all of the water. And on the right, that's the new roof before we sealed it. So um, in the last phase, we figured out how to seal the roof because it's still porous. Um, you have to pour the quite a thick piece of lime on the roof and sprinkle it with water over 2 or 3 weeks so it actually sets and cures properly. But still, it can let some water in. Um, I haven't really seen this type of, of structure anywhere else in the world to have a flat lime roof. But yeah, we also reintroduced the sloping to make sure that water runs off and reopened the drains and made sure everything was working well. And this is what it looks like from the underside with a lot of the timbers changed and treating all of the wood with a local mixture of this now is engine oil, but there's also some plants from the nomadic tradition, from the nomadic huts that we crush up into it and creates that red color. And this was another building which was, for some reason, completely rendered in concrete. We removed all of that and replaced the pointing that was also concrete. As you can see, like the difference on the left and the right. And there was a part of the building that had collapsed. So we had to completely remove a whole section of the floor, um, replace maybe 90% of the timbers, and that's the finished on the right. And this is also the veranda. We had to. There was some corrugated steel that had a lot of holes in it. We completely replaced that. A lot of the timbers had to be replaced. A lot of the handles on the sides, and we also repointed the walls, which the parts that were damaged and falling off and trapping moisture because it was they put concrete pointing on top of lime. And this is the interior of that building. We removed that quite ugly. Uh, it's called soffitto, is the Italian word, but on the ceiling, and exposed the beams because it was quite nice, and we didn't really need to cover it, and replastered the walls where it needed to. So this was a bit less of a problem because it's from the 1910s, 1920s, so it didn't have as much damage as the last building, which was from about nearly 300 years old. So there's a, yeah. And then this is also uh, bringing it back to its original, removing the stuff that had been added and looked a bit off. And again, this is replacing the timbers and the roof and uh, removing a layer of concrete from the floor to show the stone underneath. And yeah, this is the before, how it looked. It was letting a lot of water in. There was pigeons who basically owned the whole house. And this is how it's looking like now. Um a lot of the timbers had to be replaced. And this is the section that collapsed and that we had to rebuild. So we had to remake those arches so that it matches the design. And then this is the British Residency, where the old governor used to live, and there was huge problems with the walls and a lot of cracks and sections of the wall that had to be rebuilt. And this is it after. But in the time that I was in Berbera, we decided to we heard from the mayor of a town called Sheikh, which is an hour and a half away on the top of the mountain. This is where the British in the summer months would go back to leave the coast and the extreme heat, and so the capital would move for 6 months up here, and then for 6 months down on the coast. And the mayor of that town found out and came and visited us in the restoration and invited us to have a look at this as well, which was the other governor's residence. And there was also a fort where ammunition stores that the British also built, and then also an Ottoman fort, which is in a town called Dubar, which is um, where the water for the whole city is supplied from, and the mountains on the edge of the city. And there's a viaduct that goes all the way to the city. So this was there to protect the water supply for the city. There's a lot of misconceptions about the use of different materials in Somali architecture because there isn't any knowledge in it. We found that sections of the wall in on our site were built with earth bricks, or there was stone and there was earth mortar. And I remember scratching my head a lot and thinking, is there a reason it's on this section and not that section? And it could be the same wall, half of it's earth and half of it's in lime. But it's funny, one of the builders or one of the elders was he just said they probably just ran out of lime and had to use earth to to build the rest. But that made we had to figure out where the earth was collected from. Um, and from whenever there's a rainy season, the mountains, there's a lot more earth up there because it's quite sandy on the coast. And the rain sort of pushes it and it deposits it right next to the city. So a lot of the buildings were built with earth as well as coral stone and lime architecture. And just by doing this restoration, which is, I don't think there has been any restoration work that does it correctly and with the right materials. We've had calls from all over the country to recreate. So on the top, that 3D model is the bakery of Elmi Bodari. He was a poet who, I mean, he was a baker at first, and he fell in love with his with one of his customers called Hodan, and in the late 1800s, and he wrote one of the first poems about love in Somali culture. Before that, poetry, as much as it is a big part of our culture, it was only political. It was used politically or to express grievance or to remember things. But this was the first love poem, and he's called the Father of Love. And the owner of this and the neighboring building uh, wanted to restore it and open it up to become a cultural center and somewhere for people to visit when they come to Berbera. And this is another thing that has come out of showing that heritage, restoring heritage, is more valuable than just the land that it sits on. So thankfully, they wanted to fund that, but we also got some extra funding from Expertise France, and hopefully we will be starting that soon. And then on the bottom right corner, this is Save the Children's headquarters, and they also asked for us to come and restore and reverse the damage that has been made by um, putting on plastic paints or plastering with or rendering with concrete based renders, and that work is going on as we speak. And yeah, so the impact is already being spread into the city and across the country and changing people's minds. One thing that was the thing that is more of a I probably spend most of my time and energy on is convincing people. Uh, the best way to do that is by showing, but apparently is not enough sometimes. Um, but to this day, there's still buildings. Every time I return, there's a lot of buildings that are missing, um, and it's disappointing. But we have this wonderful group of builders, of artisans, elders, engineers, and architects who have really taken on the task of restoring our own heritage. Um, and from a group of seven in the first phase, those seven then trained another 40. So this isn't the whole team, but the message is spreading and they don't need my constant supervision anymore, so that's good. So that's why they're doing the restoration of the Save the Children building. But we have more of an option now to restore rather than just demolish because before there wasn't any other way of doing anything. Um, yeah, thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Jabir. That was absolutely fascinating and really inspiring to hear what you've been doing and the team that has built up in your wake. Um, I would like to invite anybody with questions to either put up their hand and they can say their question, or if you prefer to put your question in the chat, then I can ask that question on your behalf. Mohammed, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I just want to congratulate the presenter. He made a really great presentation. Uh, my question is that whether the use of lime still in practice at Somalia. I mean, the modern construction. Do they still have tradition to use the same mortar in lime for the plasters, for the renderings, as well as for the ceilings? Because in the modern times, mostly the conventional materials and traditional materials are left behind, and cement is used mostly in modern buildings. Thank you.
Yeah, lime is still produced in Somaliland and also in Somalia. There's a lot of limestone in the mountains, and it's quite cheap. One sack of it costs about $3.5, which compared to concrete is a lot cheaper. But whenever I told people that we're building it or we're building a wall with lime, if we had to rebuild a wall or plastering with lime, they only see it as a primer. They only use it for priming walls. So it was hard for them to um, see it as a building material, like a construction material. Um, but after the elders sort of intervene and be like, yeah, that's how it was done in the past, then they start to understand. But I think using local stone and using local lime is just a no-brainer, cheaper alternative for people to build with. Um, but it's about convincing people and showing an example. And thankfully, like they're changing a bit more and opening up to the idea. I think a lot of the time people are just like, "You're not using any concrete." They didn't even believe it. So we're so stuck in that mindset, but it's changing slowly. Yeah.
There's a related question from Harun. How accessible is the lime around there?
Is very accessible. We had a expert come for visit us from Lamu, Kenya, and he was saying how they found it quite hard to restore their buildings with lime because they're not allowed to cut mangrove forests, so they don't know they can't burn any lime when they can't really take the shells. But is very accessible. You can find it anywhere and delivered all over. Even export it all the way to Ethiopia. They export it to South Sudan, so it's quite abundant and cheap, affordable. Yeah.
Interesting. There's a question from Tashiana. Do you prepare the lime mortar as you go or beforehand? What's the process like for that project?
Yeah, so we put it in those mounds. We like sprinkle a bit of water. There's like 1.5 parts of lime and 1 part sand, and they mix it all up and put it in these mounds. And it ferments for 2 weeks, and then after 2 weeks we can use it. So when after the 2 weeks we break it apart, and then we have another lime that has been soaking in water, slaked in water, and then we add those two together, and then it becomes ready. But it takes about 2 weeks to use. But we start with that, and everyone mucks in and prepares all of this lime, and then we use it after 2 weeks. Yeah.
And Namrata asks, what do you add to the lime mortar as a binder?
Yeah, so slaked lime. That was we had these water tanks that we cut in half, and basically just soak it for 2 nights or overnight, and then it is quite it becomes a bit more fatty. So the lime that's been um, fermenting is it just turns into sand after 2 weeks, and then once they get together, um, then when we do apply it on the walls or on the roof, there's less cracking. There's not as much water is needed.
And then changing the subject slightly, Richard Hughes asks, do you have a problem with termites? Are there traditional local solutions for removing them? In Sao Tome and Principe, we leave it to the chickens.
There is a problem with but it's more. I've never really seen a termite, but I've seen all of their damage. Um, but because it's quite a dry climate, um, it's only in the sections of the timbers that are embedded in the wall or those other planks that are top of the that are below um, the lime on top. So when it rains, it traps moisture in there. But other than that, there isn't really a big thing. There's not a big problem, but we don't have a way of removing it, but we do have a way of preventing it. So there's some plants and roots that are dried and pounded together to make a paste and mixed with oil that is applied onto the wood. It's quite hard to find those roots now, so we've been using discarded engine oil, which is another um, thing that has come up in the last couple of years, and that works pretty well. But it's about maintenance, and I think that's one thing that we have to convince the local government who owns those buildings to keep up the maintenance because we're so used to a concrete world where you just build and kind of forget about it. But in the past, maintenance was a seasonal thing. After every rain, you re-lime wash your building, patch it up. But older buildings cannot really survive just being left alone. So yeah.
Thank you. Jackie Phillips, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, hello. I'm just wondering, I presume that you do, but just in case you don't, do you know two architects, one an Ethiopian named Faso Yorgis, and the other a British architect named Michael Mallinson, who's done extensive work in the Sudan, both of whom I know, and both of whom have done restoration work, similar restoration work in both those countries. And if you don't, I can probably supply their references for you or their contact details for you.
I think Yorgos, I might have one of his books at home
Oh, very
on
likely.
Addis Ababa architecture. Is that him?
Yes, that's the
Yes.
one.
But I think I've heard of the other one. I think Sarah mentioned mentioned him to me. But I would love to meet them. I pass through Addis Ababa on the way back usually. And yeah, Michael Mallinson is the other one.
Yes, yes, he did restoration work in Suakin,
Yeah,
so that would be very similar to Berbera.
yeah, very similar because they were both under Khedivites, like
Yes.
Egyptian Ottoman rule for a bit.
And
Yeah.
British and et cetera, et cetera. Yes. Okay. I'll round them up and send them on to you. Do you have an email address or can I
Yes.
just send them through Rachel?
Uh, anyway, it's fine. I can put my email in the chat as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, Ikra Asim has asked,
Rowena, not Rachel.
what tests are carried out to analyze historic mortars?
So we we put it into acid. So this was Mark Womersley. We chipped some of it up, crushed it up, and put it into acid to see if it was lime and not Jesmonite. Um, but other than that, there aren't really there's not that much kit that we can use there unless we bring it over. Um, but what we did was we did that smaller building a year before we started the larger one. So we went through all of the seasons, and when we did come back to it, we realized which mixtures look worked the best and withstood the test of time. So that was another way of that we looked at it.
Thank you. Um, there are various comments and questions in the chat about additions to lime mortar. Namrata asked, do you add jute, jaggery, or lentils to your lime mix?
No, in the beginning, like we did bring some, we tested, but it it really, I don't know, the lime is just is quite easy to work with. So it stays on the wall. Doesn't really need that much support. And it finishes quite smooth. So we used there was a lot of aggregate inside from unburnt limestone that's mixed in with it that gave it a bit more structure. So we were just for the finishing coat, we would just use straight lime that has been slaked for a while in water, and that created quite a smooth surface.
Ahmed Bashir, who's a civil engineer on the Suakin Heritage and Community Peace Project in Eastern Sudan, has said, we are currently restoring a historic mosque and have applied lime plaster in accordance with heritage conservation principles. However, we are facing a challenge. Some areas of the plaster are losing their adhesion and stability. We believe this issue may be related to the salts naturally present in the coral stone used in the original construction. Have you encountered a similar problem while restoring historic buildings constructed with coral stone or other salt-contaminated masonry materials? And if so, what methods or treatments did you use to overcome this issue and ensure the long-term stability and durability of the lime plaster?
Yeah, for us, it was so the coral stone didn't really have as much salt in it because it's quite. I think the stone was quarried maybe 250 years ago, um, so it was quite good. It had a lot of time to dissipate. I think the more issue was the sand. We left that out for a couple months for it to dry off. Um, but for us, the debonding was happening because of the water ingress in the from the roof. So it was debonding at the top, and then it was also debonding at the bottom from the building sucking up moisture from the ground. So I think after removing the plants around that the local government planted next to the buildings and telling the cleaners and the maintenance staff to not sprinkle water all over the ground. That helped. Um, but yeah, salt wasn't necessarily that much of a problem because it was also lifted from the ground, so the building was kind of on a plinth. But yeah, I'm not sure. We haven't had the same issues yet. Yeah.
Thank you. Drashti has asked she said you've mentioned about 3D documentation of the buildings. Did you use the model in the process of restoration? If so, can you explain how?
Yeah. So I studied architecture, so I like to draw the building in detail from on CAD and make a 3D model, but also to get the good detail, I just use my phone, the LiDAR, or I use my camera, take loads of photos and get a photogrammetry, and then put that into a CAD software. I use Rhino and literally just trace from that 3D model. I find it makes it a bit easier to you get all of the measurements. You can collect it all at once and then work at home and put in. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions? That's all the ones in the chat, I think.
I think
The chat has been very active.
I just wanted to know, can you just say the name of the poet again? Because I was trying to look it up.
Ilmi Bodari. There's two spellings, but I'll give you the Somali one. But his poems are online and um, translated. But there's also a song that I can find for you that was made from the poetry.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Such a lovely story, isn't it? To with the bakery. That would be great interpretation.
It's like I don't think that would have happened if it wasn't for this project. But it was when people can see that you can because it's a building, it's just closed, but it has value, and you can make value out of it, and people will want to come. So, yeah.
We've had one more question. What were your considerations regarding rainwater management and the electrical system?
Yeah, for rainwater management, we basically have like a mixture of camel fat that we mix with the lime, and then that's the final coat on the top. But for rainwater management, we don't have that much rain, but when it does, it's quite strong. So all of the roofs were already, they had a slope to them. So we restored those slopes. Um, there was a lot of the drains that were already existing in the parapet, that were blocked up or weren't open or um, draining onto the wall. We extended those so it drains out of away from the wall. Um, and yeah, we just restored the original drainage system, rainwater management system. And for the electrical, this has been this is still being sorted out because the electrical system in the building is quite dangerous looking, and it would be a shame for it to burn down after putting in all of that work. So we're working with the local government to. Um, there's a family friend who's from Manchester who moved back to Somaliland, who's an electrician. So he's advising them to basically have it, as more of an international standard, so it doesn't accidentally burn down. Yeah.
We've got some more questions coming in. I hope you're okay to keep answering them, Jabir. Richard Hughes has asked, are you linking your projects into the UN's Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, as much as the local government can feel inspired to. I did work with the IOM, which is the UN section for refugees. So they run a lot of the refugee camps, and we worked to. Last year, I worked with some architect, Salma Samar Tamluji. She worked in Yemen, restoring a lot of the architecture there, and earth architecture. So, and she also worked under Hassan Fathi, who did all of that wonderful earth and Nubian vaults in Egypt. And so we tried to use that to make a refugee camp more livable, for the environment, using local materials and using training the locals and refugees, so that they can build their own homes, expand it however they like. But yeah, it's just a bit slow when it gets to organizations like that. I think they were, or even the government. But I hope to make another test model or building so that people can see it and maybe take that on a bit more. Thank you.
Madhu, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, this is Madhu from Hyderabad, India. I work with a lot of school children to talk to them about built heritage, natural heritage. So my question was whether he takes school children to the site so that they can understand. Richard's question was about sustainable development goals. So of course, when you are connecting with education, you're talking about uh, education, yes, per se, quality education, and then partnership for goals. So does he connect with kids?
Yeah, so the museum itself is on the site, and they get visits from school children who come, and they give them a tour of the exhibits. And then if I'm there, then we also show them like what we're doing. But it's interesting, people are not that interested in it. We also went to the local university and taught the engineering students and then invited them the next day to come and get hands-on with the lime and actually try and do it. But they all came in suits and very prim and proper because I think they see the workers a bit below them, and then also the children, their parents might say no, like I don't want you to become a builder, or there's a lot of stigma attached, so it's difficult to get across. I think sometimes like an important person or a government person would come and visit, and they would just walk past me because I'm a bit messy or like I'm not wearing a shirt and clean. They don't think I'm working as I'm running it. We need to tackle that stigma and then also then hopefully inspire some people. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. We've got another question. Did you use lime for the flooring also?
No, no, there was no. Um, Maybe there's some stone on the floor and there's some lime in between, but not really, no.
And then the last one on the chat at the moment is, could you please tell us a bit more about the future use of the buildings? You mentioned a museum.
Yeah, so it was a museum, but it's quite new. So in the past couple of years, they haven't really been able to expand because they don't have a budget, but also they don't. There's a lot of artifacts that are being found in and around the city, like second century statues, but some people believe it's wrong to put a statue in a museum and citing religious reasons. And some people support it, so there's a bit of a conflict going on. But um, it's becoming a museum, and I'm helping and supporting the staff at the museum to connect them with other creatives across the world who work curators or um, heritage experts or researchers to speak with them and get more ideas. But so far, I've been trying to raise more funds for them because it would be a shame to restore the building and then not really use the whole space to its full potential. It's quite a big site, yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for all your questions and your engagement. It's been really wonderful to see how much this has inspired conversation. And several people have commented on what an excellent presentation, how inspiring it is to hear about the work that you've been doing, Jabir. It really is so interesting, and this is a part of the world that, as you said, isn't well known. There's very little sort of out there on this architecture. And it's really fascinating to hear what you've been doing and how you're getting other people there to appreciate it and start to change attitudes. Lots of claps from people in the audience. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your knowledge and experience with us all. That's exactly what the CHF was set up to do, was to be a network for those involved with heritage to share their knowledge and experience of working often with the same materials in different places. Thank you everybody for attending. This is the first of 4 talks that we've got planned. So next Wednesday, Peregrine Bryant is going to be talking about the response to Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. And then we've got a talk the week after that on work in Guyana. And then we finish up back in Africa, but this time in West Africa for some work in Nigeria. So I do hope that you'll be able to join us for those other talks and also encourage those that you know who might be interested to come along as well. And if you joined halfway through and missed the beginning of Jabir's talk, don't worry, we will be uploading all the talks for this series to our website. It might be a couple of weeks before this one's on there, but it will be being uploaded so you can watch it again. And if you have any questions about the work of the CHF, then do get in touch with us. Do follow us on our social media channels, and we'd really love to hear from you and continue this conversation. So thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jabir.